Our next talk is about plugin reviews and the top 10 mistakes plugin authors make. So I think this follows on really well from a couple of talks ago, which is all about plugin development. And we're going to hear the talk from Luke Carbis, who I have to read this verbatim, and you'll see why in a second. So Luke is a self-deputized open source emissary and vigilante plenipotentiary for WordPress proletariat affairs. Yeah.
Just the one mistake in that, but well done. It's better than... I divined that introduction maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and I don't think anybody's managed to get through it without stumbling over at least one of the words.
Yeah, I didn't practice very much. So, so Luke works closely with WordPress product companies to fast-track their growth and inspire beautifully written code. But more importantly, maybe for this part, is that he's a big part of the community as a plugin developer and also a core contributor release lead, WordCamp organizer, seems appropriate for this event, and a member of the plugin review team, which is where this talk comes from. So give it up for Luke.
Thanks, everyone. Is my mic working? Yeah, cool. All right. Who here is a plugin author? All right. Number of hands. Any aspiring plugin authors in the room? A few? Yeah, nice. And who has got a WordPress plugin hosted on the WordPress.org repo, the plugin repo? Just a few people. Is anybody got a WordPress plugin that they don't distribute through the repo? Yeah, lots more answers there. That's interesting. Yeah. And my last question is, has anybody ever installed a plugin from the WordPress.org repo? Yeah, everybody's got their hands up for that. Okay, the WordPress.org plugin repository is the central place for free plugins in the WordPress ecosystem. And I am a contributor. And one of the reasons why people really love and trust the WordPress.org plugin repo is because all of the plugins that are there have to pass certain rules, certain guidelines. One of them is that there are no commercial plugins allowed, just for example. And so you can feel pretty safe in the knowledge that when you install a plugin, you're not going to see any upsells, you're not going to see any advertising or anything like that, right? Okay. My sense of humor is maybe a little drier than the audience expected. No, you're not allowed to sell premium plugins through the WordPress.org repo. And of course, everything that goes through there is reviewed. It's reviewed for security compliance. It's reviewed for, we look at things like dark patterns. We're trying to really crack down on some dark patterns that happen. There are various different guidelines that plugins have to pass, and performance and things like that. So every plugin on the .org repo has gone through a review process and passed it. Now, our team, it's all volunteers, and we handle somewhere between 100 and 200 new plugin submissions every week. So that's a lot of plugin submissions. And the reality is that maybe only 1 in 100 I'm able to go, yeah, approve that first time. Most plugins go through about 3 weeks of back and forths with the plugin author and the review team, going, oh, you need to update this, and they send a new version. Oh, you didn't change that though, and then they send a new version. And so there's this back and forth discussion that happens, maybe 5 or 6 version increments. For some authors, other authors are gun and they do it like 1, 2 submissions and it's there. But to reduce that amount of back and forth, I thought what I'll do is I'll create a WordCamp presentation, and maybe if you're a plugin author or if you'd like to have a plugin on the WordPress repo, you might be able to find something inside this presentation that will help you streamline through that plugin review process. Make sense? Yeah, so this is a developer talk. There's code involved here. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the last time I gave this talk, it was a lightning talk. and it was like all over in 10 minutes, but it felt really, really, really rushed. It's really trying to push through those points quickly. So for this time, instead of doing it as a lightning talk, I decided I might extend it, but I suspect we might have plenty of time for Q&A, and I know people often have lots of questions about why is this guideline that way, or why do I have to follow this rule, or WooCommerce does it this way, why can't I? And so if you have any of those questions, maybe make a note of them in your head, write them down, and because we'll have time for QA at the end. All right, I think that's the intro done. So I'm going to go through, in this talk, through a series of 10 mistakes that new plugin submissions often make, and we can talk about how to resolve those. Now, the first one is trademark violations, and about 1 in 4 plugins that I review, maybe 1 in 5, they just get sent straight back with no review at all, because the name that they've chosen or some other aspect, maybe the description, it contains a trademark violation. It's not something you necessarily really think of when you're choosing the name for your plugin, and it is kind of important because you want to create a website and choose a domain name and get everything prepped for this launch of your product, and then you submit it, and we have to come back with you and say, oh, sorry, you can't call it that. So something to always think about early on. Got some examples here. First one is, just be careful that you're not using a trademarked term. Redirect to App Store, that's a real submission that somebody sent. And we had to say, sorry, App Store is registered trademark by Apple. You're not allowed to use the word App Store at all. And this comes up all the time with various different companies and trademarked terms. So be careful about that. We ended up deciding to go with App Redirect. And that was a back and forth discussion between it was my idea for the name. I suggested it. How do you feel about App to Redirect? And the author came back and said, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. Another one, WooCommerce Payment Gateway. All right, pick your payment gateway, right? Whatever you're doing. We get this a lot, actually, because you'd be surprised at how many tiny banks there are in all different parts of the world. Some random bank in Serbia, and someone creates a WooCommerce Payment Gateway for it, right? So what you need to be careful about is not making it seem like you are the official owner of that payment gateway. Let's say you're making a Commonwealth Bank payment gateway. You can't call it Commonwealth Bank for WooCommerce because it will make it seem like you're representing Commonwealth Bank, and you're not, okay? So if you're just creating something for something, and it also applies with if you're making something for another plugin like Gravity Forms, you can't say Gravity Forms, CSS styles. You have to say, the preferred formatting is something for Gravity Forms, something for WooCommerce, payment gateway for WooCommerce. So that for word is the standard that we use when you're making something that's compatible with another plugin or another service or SaaS or whatever it is, but you don't own that SaaS. So that you'll see that a lot in WordPress.org in the repo. Next one, we look at your email address. So maybe you have created this cool plugin, and you've called it Hello Dolly, and you're saying, all right, I want to create an address for this, and I'm going to create a Gmail, hellodolly@gmail.com, and then you submit it. Well, we say, well, this Hello Dolly website, we don't know that you belong to the Hello Dolly company. So we use email addresses to verify that you represent the company, yeah? So always try, especially for new product launches, try to use an email address with a domain name attached. As an aside, by the way, we also check the domain. So if you're launching something new and you think, I'm going to submit my plugin, and then once I'm approved, I'll launch my website. Don't do it in that order because you'll get rejected. You want to launch your website, put your domain in your plugin header, because if that 404s or if if it doesn't work for whatever reason, we're not going to accept your plugin. We need to know that that website's working. And same with the email address. While you're there, create your email address. And this way we sort of weed out people who are trying to. There are some people who are sneaky. They go, I want to pretend like I'm this other company, and because it'll seem official, more people will use my plugin. Yeah? And then they create a Gmail, and that's how we prevent that sort of abuse. All right, and then last example here. We have been told by Facebook that there is just a blanket ban on any Facebook trademarks, including WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, anything like that. So if you're creating a plugin that integrates with any Facebook product whatsoever, even if it's just a small part, you are not allowed to use any Facebook trademark terms, even if it's for WhatsApp, like there was the suggested example above. Facebook is the exception, right? Not allowed to use any Facebook terms at all in your title or your description. All right, that's trademark violations. Third-party services. This one is very common. Lots of people get pulled up on this, and it's very easy to fix. But your plugin probably wants to integrate with a third-party service, right? It might be SaaS flavor of the day. It's maybe you want to go and use Google Fonts, or maybe you want to integrate with an analytics platform to gather analytics after your users have opted in. Whatever it is, if you are using any sort of third-party API, then you need to include that in your plugin README. Okay? What we ask is that you write a short paragraph, something like, this plugin uses the following services, and then link to each of those services' terms of use and privacy policy. Also, if you don't have to, if you don't have to use a third-party service, don't. So what sometimes we get is like people will put a script or reference a bit of JavaScript that's hosted somewhere, and they'll include that in their plugin, right? They'll on-queue this JavaScript that exists on an external website. And we don't like that. In fact, you're not allowed unless you really, there's no other way of doing it. If you could just copy that JavaScript code and include it in your plugin, that's what we'd prefer you do. Same goes for images, right? If you're creating a plugin, maybe you want to include like a banner image in your plugin, and you think, you know, it would be good if I could just update that banner image on my website, and then everybody's plugin will, because it's referencing the external image source, they'll automatically get the new banner image. But that's not allowed either. You have to include the image assets directly in your plugin, unless you've got a really good reason not to. Make sense? All right, we can keep going. Plugin tags. Okay, we see this also a lot. This is another one of the big ones, is people will put in, so there's two places to have tags in your plugin. There's in your readme.txt file, and there's your plugin header, right, in your main plugin.php file. And one of those required tags is the stable tag. And what people will do is that they'll say, the stable tag is the version of WordPress, and the tested up to is maybe my plugin version. Or they'll get them mixed up. Well, they'll both be the plugin version, or they'll both be the WordPress version, whatever it is. We need to make it so that the tested up to references the latest version of WordPress, preferably. Actually, if you don't keep your tested up to date, your plugin will lose ranking in the WordPress.org search results. So if you're regularly updating your plugin, make sure you're paying attention to that tested up to tag in your plugin header. And then there's also the stable tag, and that should be the current version of your plugin. Okay, that's used for you'll keep it as stable 1.2 while you're trying to test the 1.3 beta or something like that. That's not quite ready, so that's the stable tag. That's how that's used. Make sure that they're the right way around, and also people will often update one in their main plugin file headers and forget to update it in their README. So someone will send me a plugin, I'll send them back and say, sorry, you need to change this, and they'll come back and there's a new version. It's a new version. They've incremented the version in their main plugin file, and it might be all good to go, but their README file still has the old version. So I have to send it back to them now and say, oh, yeah, please just also update your README, and then we're good. All right. Internationalization. Okay. We get this a lot. One thing is, you are not required to make your plugin ready for translation, if you don't want to. If you want to just ship your language only, then you can. But if you're going to use translation functions in your plugin, which we strongly recommend you do, it's a really good best practice, then you need to do it properly. Now, if you're a good developer, you might think, I've got these functions, right? These underscore functions, _e. In this example, it's escape HTML, __. These are the translation functions that create a string that can be translated. And the second argument that they take is your plugin's slug. And you might think, why don't I use a variable for that? It makes sense. I might want to change what that variable is in the future, and rather than have to go through my code and change it everywhere, I'll just reference a variable and I can change it in one place. Right? Keep it simple. Actually, that's not allowed. You need to use the actual string, the plugin slug, as a string. And the reason for that is because plugin translation tools, not just for plugins, but translation tools in general, they use, I think the right word is static code analysis. They don't run any PHP. They don't know what that variable is set to. Okay? So when you upload your plugin and maybe the WordPress.org translation site, or maybe you're using a translating tool like Poedit, well, they just match the __ portion, and then they try and figure out what's the second argument, just with like a regex or something, right? They're not actually running any code, and that's why you need to make sure that your plugin slug is a string, not referencing a variable. If you reference a variable, sorry, I'm going to send it back. Sanitization. Okay, we'll talk about sanitization and validation and things like that. In terms of sanitization, and escaping is the other big one. So we want to sanitize early and escape late. If you don't know about this, you can have a look on developer.wordpress.org and have a look at that website that I've linked to there. Maybe I should put a QR code. Like this morning, wasn't that, did you see Kate Toons and Tony Constantino's presentation? I am not that high energy, I apologize, but that was a cool idea. I'll do it next time. All right, so learn about sanitization and escaping, and learn it deeply. This is something that people get wrong a lot, and annoyingly, it's something people push back on, right? So like I'll review and say, I'm sorry, you need to sanitize this. And they'll push back and say, but I don't think it needs to be sanitized. I'm sorry, but I'm the reviewer. I said it has to be sanitized, you got to do it, right? You need to sanitize everything, and you need to sanitize as early as possible. So what this is if you are taking user-submitted data, maybe it's post data, get data, even server data, right? Hopefully the PHP developers in the room know what I'm talking about here. If you're using that data in any way, you've got to sanitize it the moment you retrieve it, okay? So you can see in that bad example there, I'm taking the post title directly and updating post meta with it. And that's a security problem. Why is it a security problem? Yeah. Could put anything in there, right? Could even put in some dodgy SQL statement that's going to destroy my database or something like that, right? So anything could be in there. There's a big security problem. We need to make sure that that is what we expect it to be. And in this case, maybe we expect it to be a text field. So we're going to use sanitized text field. Title equals sanitized text field. And I really like to have this separated. It makes it much easier for readability and also for reviewers to sanitize on a separate line. And then we can update post meta with that. Now, you might be thinking, that's good, but I want to run my own sanitization. I don't want to use the WordPress built-in sanitization functions, right? Maybe I have a complicated piece of data. Maybe it's like a strange JSON array, and I want to go through it and sanitize it properly. I don't want to use the built-in functions for that. Well, the answer is yes, you can do that. We don't mind if you sanitize using your own handmade sanitization functions. We just ask that you call it something sensible, like sanitize my custom thing, right? Because if it's just referencing some random function, then we're reviewing so many plugins, we're not going to actually like click on that function and then check, are you sanitizing things properly? We're just going to see, oh, they're passing this post data directly into a different function. That's not sanitized, right? So if you call it something sensible, we'll see, oh, it looks like they're not sanitizing, but look, actually, it looks like they're not using a WordPress sanitization function. But I can clearly see it's a sanitization function, and then I'll just go and check that sanitization function, make sure it's all good, make sure it's all above board, and then we can move on from there. All right. So you're welcome to self-sanitize using your own stuff, but please just call it something sensible. Then we come to escaping. Okay, escaping. People really get caught up on the escaping HTML templates thing, but it's not just that. In the most basic sense of it, escaping is when you want to output some data. Maybe you've retrieved it from your database. Maybe it's still that post data from earlier. When you want to output a variable using an echo or print statement, something like that, at the very latest opportunity, when you're actually echoing it out, that's when you can escape it. Please don't escape it on like a line before into a different variable and then output that variable without an escaping function with your echo. That just make things a bit more complicated for the review team to figure out, oh, is this actually escaped? And our automated tools are going to say it's not, and whatever. Escape as late as possible. And also that way, down the road, imagine you're like escaping on line 15 and then outputting it on line 16, but then down the road, maybe you're maintaining your plugin, making some changes, and you just insert a few extra lines in between 15 and 16, and maybe it's not actually escaped properly anymore. That's why we ask that you escape as late as possible. So if you're echoing a URL, you can use the function escape URL. If you're echoing, I don't know, there's various different escaping functions, which again, you can read about at that URL. In this example, we have escaping a string, right? Like we want to escape all the HTML out of our post title. You can see how we're doing that there. And you can see we can also use the escaping function along with our translation function. So don't ever use like escape HTML and then an _e inside of that. You can combine them together with this very handy escape HTML _e function. Learn about escaping, please, and translation if you don't already know about that. All right, let's talk about HTML content, because it happens all the time that you are going to build this template out, right? You might have like a bunch of paragraph tags and images, and you're going to build this whole template to be output on the front end as HTML. How do you escape that? You can't run it through escape HTML. That'll pull all the HTML out of it. How do you safely do that? Well, we have this really handy function, and it's got a cute name too. It's called WP Kisses, or KSES. And WP Kisses uses a known list of WP Kisses allows you to provide a known list of safe HTML tags and attributes, and that way you can output using WP Kisses. That's how you correctly escape your HTML content. A lot of the time people will say, oh, I can't escape this. It's a whole template. I can't escape it. And so we're constantly telling people, hey, this function, WP Kisses, exists. Actually, I don't really like to use WP Kisses because the second argument it takes can often be this huge big array. So if I can, I'll use WP Kisses post. And WP Kisses post is a variation that doesn't take a second argument. Instead, it just uses the standard WordPress list of paragraph tags, image tags, just a whole heap of standard HTML tags that are safe, that you're comfortable with. It'll pull out your scripts, but it'll escape bad stuff, but WP Kisses post I'm using all the time in my plugins. And if you've got templates, then I'd encourage you to look into that particular function. Nonces. I reckon 1 in 5 plugins get through without having to need to add nonces into their plugins. People, and I get it, I'm a plugin author too, and I kind of hate doing nonces. Like, they're no fun to implement, and they're a bit of a pain and an afterthought. Actually, you know what I usually do is I develop my whole plugin, and then at the end I go and add the nonces in because they're no fun. Does anybody agree with me? Is it just me who doesn't like nonces? Thanks, guys. Yeah, but you need them. It's a security thing. I could tell you all about what they do and how they help, but I don't think I will. It stands for number used once. It's a way to make sure that a form isn't submitted from a bad actor. All right. So we need to verify our form data, that it was submitted from a good place. And so you need to use these functions. You can use WP nonce URL, WP nonce field, and these will create fields in your form and make it all really handy. WP create nonce. And then, so these top ones are what we're going to use to add our nonces into our form. It's actually easier than my head tells me it is. And then when we verify the nonce, it's a bit of boilerplate here that I don't love. As a developer, this kind of looks a bit ugly to me, but it's required. We ask that you sanitize your nonces and unslash them, okay? So rather than just do WP verify nonce like I've got that example here, that's how maybe you've done it in the past. We want you to sanitize your nonces and unslash them. Before you sanitize, so unslash first, then sanitize, and then take that and verify it. So that's the correct way of doing a nonce. And all the time, I'm going back to plugin authors and saying, sorry, you haven't done a nonce. You know, one thing that I get a lot of, and people get quite upset about it, and I'm sorry, this is just it's how it is, it's the rules, is people will say, I'm adding a form field to a WooCommerce field, and WooCommerce already verifies the nonce, so why do I have to? Well, the answer is sorry, but that may be the case, but we still ask that your plugin adds its own nonce to look at, because who knows what WooCommerce is going to do in the future. Maybe they change it, maybe they, I don't know, whatever. But that's the way we've got it set up as a catch-all for everything, right? WooCommerce, they're pretty good. They're probably not going to, but if we make an exception for WooCommerce, then who knows about that other dodgy plugin that you're extending or whatever. So always include your own nonces, even if you're adding a field to an existing WordPress form from a different plugin or from WordPress core. Yeah? All right, cool. Unsafe SQL calls, also quite common. It can be really hard, actually, to prepare a custom SQL call for WordPress. It often takes me 2 or 3 tries to figure out how can I do this properly. But when you're doing a SQL call, you can see in that bad example here, WP-DB query, there's no prepare statement. You need to use WP-DB prepare in addition, and that's going to basically kind of work as a sprintf sort of thing, or sprintf, I don't know, however you want to pronounce that, where you can add in placeholders. You can see in this example here, we've got the values, and we've got a digit, and a string, right? And we're preparing that, and that way, when WordPress runs this, it's going to make sure that the values being inserted into the database are of the type that are expected. I really appreciate all your nodding along. Is it autumn? It just makes me feel like I'm getting through at least to someone. Thank you, Autumn. Yeah, so we want to make sure we're using prepare and that we don't put any variables. That's the thing. Don't put variables into your query, except for the table name. You can use a variable for the table name. But if you've got any other variables in your database query, it's problematic. Again, if you want to learn more about any of these functions at all, then WordPress.org is your friend. What have I got here? Just another good example. Right, so in this case, we're inserting directly into a database where you can see that we're using the variable for the database name. Prefixes. All right, I don't know about you, but for me, I really just like consistency in my prefixes. I just want it always to be all the same thing. But most plugins that are submitted to .org, they decide to go with a lot of different prefixes. They'll use, here, there's an example here on the right-hand side. They'll use WP, random prefix, and then sometimes they'll leave the WP out, sometimes they'll use their company name, and then other times they'll use the plugin name. Please, let's make it consistent, all right? Always use the same consistent prefix. And the other thing with this first example here is your prefix needs to be at least 4 characters long. Often, we get plugins submitted that are 3-character prefixes, and there are 60,000 plugins on WordPress.org. Chances are your 3 have been already taken. Why do you prefix, by the way? Well, the answer is to avoid common function names from conflicting with each other. So you add your plugin prefix so that any globally spaced function names don't conflict. All the time, I'll see a plugin that's like init_plugin and in a global sort of thing, and that's got to have a prefix at the start of it. So you can see in this bottom left example here, we can't just have a class called updater. Do you know how many plugins want to have? If we let plugins with class update all the time, we'd have class conflicts when you install 2 plugins with the same. So you can use namespaces. So you want to use the name updater, that's great, you can, as long as you namespace with your plugin name. And the last example I've got here is often people will, and it makes sense, I can see the logic in it, they will do init_their plugin name or init_their plugin prefix. No, let's keep, again, consistency is king. Let's keep all of our any global functions to include the prefix first, underscore, whatever it is. All right. That's it. That's me. If you want to get in touch, you're welcome to email me. I'm not actually as active on Mastodon as I used to be. And I want to finish the presentation with just like some thoughts and feelings about the current state of the plugin repo. When I first started contributing to the WordPress plugin repo, the reason why I did that was because I felt WordPress could use a little bit of DevRel. You know what I mean? Like maybe as a plugin developer, I wasn't getting as much from the plugin review team in terms of coaching and support and ongoing stuff with my plugin as I maybe would have preferred. So I did what everybody here hopefully would do when they see a problem with an open source project and they want to change it. I contributed. I started contributing to that team, and that's why I contribute, is to help plugin authors get their plugins out there, maybe make some money from their plugins, and reach their users, help people build their sites, all that good stuff. And thankfully, after I started contributing to this team, I've had people approach me and ask if they would sponsor me. My contributions are actually sponsored by Omnisend and Elementor. So thanks, shout out to those companies. They sponsor my time, and I'm able to work on this full time. And so this part, I'm just getting a little personal here, but I just want to share. And people often ask me, you like go to an event, you meet new people, and people say, what do you do? And I say, oh, I contribute to this open source product. I can contribute to WordPress. Have you heard of WordPress? Oh yeah, I think my cousin uses that on their business site or whatever. Yeah, I've heard of WordPress. So you work for WordPress, do you? And I said, no. WordPress isn't a company. It's not owned by anyone. That's the beauty of it. That's what I love about my job. I'm not working for one person. I'm not putting money in the pocket of my boss. I'm contributing to an open source project. I get to be part of this amazing community. It's a community, wow, and it powers so much of the web. Isn't it amazing that we have this open source thing that has such an impact in the world, and it's not owned by anyone? Recently, things have happened in the WordPress community that's made me realize, actually, WordPress, at least the plugin repo that I contribute to, it is owned by someone. And kind of a lot of my work is kind of just putting money in the pocket of one guy. And I'm going to continue to contribute to the WordPress directory because, like I said, the main reason that I do that is to help plugin authors. But I've been feeling really down. I've been really demotivated by all this stuff that's been happening in WordPress. And sad, really, scared also. And I know that a lot of people probably are in the same boat. I want to put that out there just to say that you're not the only ones. And hopefully what this WordCamp is really showing me is that WordPress isn't actually about the software. It's about the people in this room. It's about the community. The amount of people that have been at this WordCamp who said, oh, I actually don't work in WordPress anymore. I've just came here because I'm part of the community, you know? And so that's what WordPress is, you know? So I just want to encourage you with that. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And if we have time for questions, I'm more than happy to take as many curly ones as you can throw at me.
I think we've got 2 minutes. So.
Hey Luke, great talk.
Thanks, Ricky.
You never fail to, put on an amazing talk at WordCamps. Thank you. Quick question, and I've kind of asked this before. I don't think I've ever got a good answer. As you said, we've got over 60,000 plugins in the repository.
Actually, just under.
Just under. I always say it's over 56,000.
Yeah, it was 59 and a bit.
Yeah, but that was like 4 years ago I was saying that, so I've never updated. But you're on the review team, review the new plugins coming in. You do a really good job of that. What happens after that? We've got plugins that have been in the repository for, some for, over 15 years. Is there a review process? Obviously, they're being updated, consistently. Is there a review process on those updates, or is that just left to the authors, and we hope that they're all?
That's a good question. What like, sorry, reset. We just got the plugin review queue down to 0. Like, obviously on any given day. Thank you. You might be 5 or 10, but you'll get a turnaround on your plugin review inside a business day, give or take. That was a tough job for new plugin submissions. There is no way a volunteer team could cover all of the plugin updates that happen as well. So if somebody wanted to come along, submit an ordinary looking, perfectly safe plugin, and then later on turn it into some evil thing, they could do that. So the processes that we have in place to prevent that is pretty simple. If somebody emails plugins@wordpress.org and says, hey, this plugin is doing something dodgy, then we look into it. And often we'll ban them, or if it's a plugin with over a certain amount of installs, I think it's 40,000, we'll send them a warning. Right? We don't just close large plugins. So that's how it works. And there are no exceptions. I've sent warnings to WooCommerce to stop doing dodgy stuff, right? And they have, I don't mean to pick on WooCommerce at all. It's a great team, and they've worked closely with the plugin review team, and they've fixed up the stuff we've asked them to fix up, and they've told us how they're going to do it and communicated well. So props to WooCommerce. I don't mean to pick on anyone at all, but if there are ever any plugins that have updated and you think, that's not quite right, or I found a security vulnerability, then you should probably report that to PatchStack, because I think they might have a bounty. Or you could email plugins@wordpress.org, and we'll get onto that at that point. That's how we handle the amount of updates that come through. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay, great. We've just run out of time, so we'll cut it there. But if you've got more questions, Luke would be happy to answer them afterwards, right?
Yes, please. Also, I think Dion is running a hallway talk after this to talk more about the .org directory.
Okay, great. Thanks. Give Luke a hand.